I grew up in a small town in South Jersey. It was a farming community in those days. It's not any longer, but sort of a challenging family situation. My mom was ill from the very early days, and so it was basically the three of us, my dad, my older brother, and me. My dad sold typewriters for a living, and so wasn't quite able to have both my older brother and me in school at the same time, so either I got a scholarship someplace or I waited out 2 years, which was the plan. One of the counselors knew I had an interest in aviation and said, well, why don't you apply to Annapolis? It's a scholarship and you might be able to fly for the Navy. And then late in the game, someone suggested applying to the Air Force Academy. At the time, I didn't know where Colorado was, much less Colorado Springs. But we ended up, not getting into Annapolis, which has been the source of some jest between me and my Navy counterparts over the years. And I was a first alternate to the Air Force Academy. And the kid that was the primary choice was the quarterback for the high school football team in the town adjacent to ours, although he had a bad knee, and it turned out that Steve couldn't pass the entrance physical. And so, interestingly enough, he went on to be a Division II All-American anyway. So there's some question about whether the Air Force Academy got the best deal. Unprepared, I would say, and it turned out I was the third youngest cadet in our class, a brand new 17 pretty much. And so once I got there for Dooley summer, I was certainly task saturated. I remember during Hell Week, which is a little different now, I know, than it was then, but having an epiphany one day, looking out the window into the quad and thinking to myself, I guess I actually want this. I had friends that helped me who had military experience. Bob was a brat, his dad was an Army brigadier. Ron was a prep schooler. So the bottom line is, there were many people who sort of helped me cope. And that was instrumental in the outcome. And then I started out as an aero major and discovered when I got to thermodynamics that maybe engineering wasn't for me. And so ended up in the poli-sci international affairs soft science area, which was more compatible, I guess, with my abilities. I had some opportunities to do the leadership track. Was an O&T officer for the wing. I ended up being a squadron commander, but it certainly prepared me well to be a lieutenant and a captain, and to strive to be trusted and to develop a competency that others respected. I asked for an F4, but the reality was I knew in my heart of hearts that I probably would not have made the best fighter pilot. And so I ended up with a Herc. Herc people were veterans, Air Force Cross recipients, Silver Star recipients, and so on. And so it was a wonderful environment to grow up in as a young aviator. Came back to Little Rock with a lead qualification and a fair amount of experience. Had upgraded to aircraft commander while I was at Clark. Got to Little Rock at a period when many folks were departing the Air Force, and so upgraded rather quickly to both instructor and flight examiner status. More importantly, met Susie while I was there, and so it was quite a consequential tour. Then went off to an internship in Washington, made the choice against some headwind to move to special operations. And so I worked for an Army brigadier by the name of Dick Potter, who's a legend in the Army Special Forces. We operated out of Turkey. We were responsible for the northern half of Iraq, both for personnel recovery reasons and also for insertion of American shooters. I had the opportunity to go to Hurlburt, and this was in the immediate aftermath of Desert One. Special Ops clearly changed as a result of Desert One, and I became part of that network of captains and so on that basically said never again. spent the next 25 years on and off in the business. You know, later in life, served as the J3 on the Joint Staff, the director, went out to Transcom as the commander, and then unexpectedly back to Washington as the chief. There was a Corona meeting, the 4 stars and their civilian counterparts at Wright-Patterson. We're all in the room waiting for the chief and the secretary to arrive. Neither of them were there, and then all of a sudden, all the Blackberries started buzzing, and people start looking and see that both the secretary and the chief had been relieved. And so everyone around the table knew instantaneously that someone there was going to be the next chief. Given the circumstances, there was a need for someone to step into the breach, and the civilian leadership decided it was me, and there was no way to say no. The first month was a bit challenging because we let 13 people go over the nuclear event. You know, some equipping issues, cultural issues that needed attention. Remotely piloted aircraft, the B-2 successor, a number of things of that nature. You know, we wanted to recognize the RPA operators as aviators. Not everybody saw them in that light. And so I remember going out to Creech and awarding the first RPA pilot wings. It was important to mainstream this capability that was going to be with us indefinitely. And while there was some uneasiness about that, it was the right thing to do. And so, that is a pleasant memory for sure. Mike Donnelly and I, during the sequestration period, made a strategic decision that it would be wiser to get smaller to maintain quality, and that we would do it quickly to get through the pain. And so what we left for our successors was an Air Force too small to sustain the demand signal. Sometimes reality intervenes, as it did in this case. And so the advice I've given to successors out of that experience, that disappointment, frankly, that we made a rational call, but we didn't posture the Air Force in a way that it could respond to differing futures, was that hedging is an important part of any chief's job, and to think about that going forward. You know, there's a mythology that the chief's jobs are, they're marathons. That's nonsense. They're sprints. And Susie and I decided that we were going to run hard every day and do our best to represent this grand institution, and hopefully we met the challenge. After a little bit of a break, there was a search underway for the CEO here at Business Executives for National Security. Been here 6.5 years. It's a great mission. I would characterize it as a second career of public service, but heading over on the 2nd of January to the Institute for Defense Analysis. It's a federally funded research and development center, and their mission is to provide scientific and technical analysis to government decision makers to enable good decisions that's not tainted by corporate self-interest. It's an important mission. And I know when I served, there were many times when I made choices based more on instinct than good analysis or numbers. And hopefully we can maybe alter the balance from my experience. Our class has devoted itself to a project called the National Character and Leadership Symposium annually, in making sure that the cadets at the Academy have exposure to great Americans, to role models of character. It's a labor of love for our class, and I'm glad I could just be a little part of that. Producing men and women of character matters to the country, not just the Air Force. I mean, whatever people choose to do in the end, that being solid citizens is needed in our country. And the academy gave me a home when I had sort of a goofy home, and it was home. It was a family. It was it was something with which I was compatible. It's an honor. I recognize that I had done some things that might draw attention, but being the chief is not a ticket to be a DG. It shouldn't be. I'm thrilled. Hopefully both Susie and I will continue to represent our academy well, to remind folks in the Air Force that it's their school, not just the alumni school, that given the other selectees, it's an honor to be among them. My girl has the same public service ethic that I have. We're very compatible in that respect. And she works her tail off. She's smart, she's intuitive, she's many of the things that I'm not. But bottom line is, Susie was the singular occurrence of fortune in my life, to be sure. Someone once told me a long time ago that reputations are hard to earn and easy to lose, and certainly, integrity is one of those major features. And so that's a life lesson, which was that, people can forgive a lot of things, but few people will forgive, a lack of integrity. And so if I have a recommendation to others on what constitutes success, it isn't the paycheck, I don't think, or the size of the paycheck, and it isn't sort of the stature of the position. It is whether one arrives at a position without walking up others' backs and earns the respect and trust of others along the way. And if you accomplish that in whatever field, the clergy or the law, medicine, certainly public service, that's as good as it gets.